US is often seen as a non-redistributory country. However, realistically, that's wrong. It's entirely a farce, and realistically, what you can take away from this video is exactly how the United States does redistribute wealth, and additionally, why the US isn't that amazing at tax optimization. Hello and welcome back to Traveling Reports. Today we're going to go over why often the US is seen as redistributory, but the actuality of the situation is that the US is extremely redistributory, and in fact, it may be as a percentage one of the most redistributory countries in the world. So, of course, if you look at OECD average tax burdens, the US will rank middle of the pack. Not high, not low. That is until you realize that 62% of US taxes are paid by the top 1%. 75% of US taxes are paid by the top 10%. And only 3% of US taxes are paid by the bottom 50%. So, inherently, this is one of the most wonky ratios in the world. If you look at Europe in totality and how Europeans interact with taxation, the majority of their revenue actually is from middle-class people. So what you get is, yes, wealthy people do pay taxes in Europe, not the headline rates, or even close to them, just like the US, but you also get the middle class paying a large share of taxes, and especially in places like Italy, like France, where the cutoff for when people pay taxes is much lower. You get an insane tax burden for the middle class. And this is something that not many Europeans even know. I've lived here on and off for 3 years. I understand why they say that there's not redistribution in the United States. I understand why they believe their quality of life is better, and I'd agree with them that their quality of life is better. But actually, the majority of taxation is very much going against the middle class in Europe, and it's true redistribution in the United States, which is completely flipping on the head of what Europeans say. They say they're a redistributory country. They're a redistributory continent. Specific countries within Europe are different in how they view things, of course, and it's a 27-country bloc in the European Union, so of course you cannot just blatantly say that all of them think exactly the same. They don't. And realistically, what I view as positive tax countries are places like Poland, like Romania, where, the tax revenues that they get, they actually use. However, it's with this that the main issue within the understanding of taxation, and additionally, how taxation works in different countries, is that people assume that US is low tax. First of all, if you look at our top line rates, they're reasonable. Not the highest, not the lowest. If you look at our OECD coverage, okay, reasonable. But if you look at who's paying the taxes, it's overwhelmingly wealthy people. There is little to no taxation on middle class And this is something that, of course, people don't realize. And as I have lived in Europe, I've realized that a lot of what goes on here and most of the rest of the places in the world, the middle class gets squeezed, not the wealthy. And especially if you own land in Europe, overwhelmingly, you're not taxed on that land. And this is actually different to how the US views land as well. Of course, I will get more into depth on land ownership and how that plays into wealth creation, and why realistically I don't like land for wealth creation, but it is one of the best points of interest for wealth creation. However, realistically, you get a large variety of countries, right, that very much all tax the middle class. They're all middle class oriented, and while their Gini coefficients are low, that's partially because a lot of the billionaires that live in Europe don't just live in one place. And this is another thing where I'll go over it eventually. US-based taxation actually keeps the OECD coverage and so forth artificially low, but the reporting artificially high. And so, of course, if you are at all interested in those topics, subscribe down below. However, as I create businesses in places like Georgia, in places like Armenia, in places like all around Eastern Europe, you have what is, in essence, a very different mentality to wealth preservation due to the taxation. And on top of that, you get what is a very different view of life, realistically, and how life plays out. So if you're at all interested in learning about taxation and where you should go to lower your taxes, feel free to reach out on the Calendly link in the description down below. If you like this video, feel free to like it. If you really like this video, feel free to share it. This has been the Traveling Report, signing off.